I want you to try something right now. Think of a smell. Not a pretty one necessarily, just one that stops you. The particular cold metal sharpness of rain hitting hot pavement. The exact smell of a house you lived in as a child. Petrol. Pine trees in summer heat. Your grandmother's coat. Have you got it? Now notice what happened when you thought of it. For most of you, it wasn't just a smell. It was a place, a feeling, a person maybe. Something that arrived whole and sudden, the way memories rarely do when you try to force them. This is not an accident. Smell is the only one of our senses that bypasses the brain's logical processing centers and travels directly to the amygdala, the region governing emotion and memory. Every other sense gets filtered, interpreted, cross-referenced before you feel it. Smell arrives before you have a chance to think. We are, in other words, wired to be ambushed by scent. And yet, we treat perfume as a finishing touch, a luxury, a small bottle of something nice we spray on before we leave the house. Here is what I was surprised to find. For most of human history, perfume wasn't about smelling attractive. It was about reaching the divine, cheating death, preserving memory, and occasionally, as we'll discover, wearing the scars of a tree. Today we're talking about perfume, where it actually came from, how it works on your brain, what it costs to make, and why a molecule that in high concentration smells like rotting garbage is responsible for the intoxicating quality of jasmine. I'm Alexandra, welcome to the hidden life of things, everyday history for anyone who's ever looked at something ordinary and wondered, how did this actually get here? The word perfume comes from the Latin per fumum, through smoke. That etymology is the whole history in 2 words. The first perfumes were not liquids you wore on your skin, they were fires. Fires built from fragrant resins, woods, and dried plants. Cedar, myrrh, frankincense, juniper, which released their scent as smoke that rose upward toward whatever was up there. Every ancient culture we know of used fragrant smoke in religious practice. We have evidence of it in ancient Egypt. Temples burned kipfi, a complex blend of 16 or more ingredients including juniper berries, raisins, labdanum resin, in ceremonies that were as much about chemistry as devotion. We have it in ancient Mesopotamia, in the Vedic traditions of the Indian subcontinent, in ancient China, in the indigenous Americas. The specifics differ, of course. The underlying idea is remarkably consistent, that a good smell rises to meet the divine and that the divine responds. Frankincense, the hardened resin of boswellia trees, which grow in the dry rocky landscapes of Oman, Somalia, and Yemen, has been traded and burned for at least 5,000 years. It was valuable enough to be listed alongside gold as a gift in multiple ancient traditions. We've recently discovered that frankincense contains a compound which has mild psychoactive and mood-elevating effects when inhaled. The ancient instinct that this substance brought you closer to a spiritual state was not entirely wrong. The chemistry was doing something real. The leap from sacred smoke to personal scent happened gradually over millennia. Egyptian priests were among the first to wear fragrance, pressed into solid cones of animal fat worn on top of the head, which melted slowly in the heat and released scent throughout the day. Fragrant oils rubbed into skin appear across ancient cultures. In ancient India, in the courts of the Persian Empire, in ancient Rome, where perfume baths and scented oils were part of daily life for anyone who could afford them. But the technology that made perfume as we know it possible, a concentrated, portable, liquid scent, required a different invention. One that came not from a perfumer's workshop, but from a philosopher's laboratory. In the 9th century CE, a scholar in what is now Iraq wrote a book roughly translated into the Book of the Chemistry of Perfume and Distillations. His name was Ishaq Al-Kindi, and he is known in the history of philosophy as the first philosopher in the Arabic tradition. He was not primarily trying to make a beautiful scent. He was trying to extract what he understood as the soul of a plant. Al-Kindi, building on earlier work by scholars including the Persian physician Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, was developing and refining the technology of distillation, the process of heating a substance until it vaporizes, then capturing and cooling those vapors to produce a concentrated liquid. It was at heart a simple idea. In practice, though, it changed the world. Distillation allowed something that had never been possible before. You could take a solid rose petal and turn its volatile aromatic compounds into a clear, concentrated liquid, rose water, then rose oil. Suddenly, you could bottle a smell. You could transport it, store it, trade it. This technology spread westward along trade routes and arrived in Europe during the medieval period. For several centuries after its introduction, the line between perfume and medicine was essentially non-existent. The great perfume centers of medieval and Renaissance Europe, particularly in Italy and later France, were also apothecaries. Fragrant waters were prescribed as treatments, drunk as tonics, used to purify air that was believed to carry disease. People drank their eau de cologne. This sounds strange until you understand that cologne water was originally formulated as a tonic and medicinal preparation. The fragrant drinking version came before the wearing version. The same products that scented skin were also swallowed, rubbed onto wounds, and burned to disinfect rooms. Perfume and pharmacy were one discipline. The separation of perfume into its own distinct category, something worn purely for pleasure and attraction rather than medicine or devotion, is a relatively recent development, and it happened in large part in one small town in southern France. The town of Grasse sits in the hills above the French Riviera, surrounded by fields of roses, jasmine, lavender, and orange blossom. Today, it is considered the perfume capital of the world, and for several centuries it dominated the industry in a way that shaped how all of us think about fragrance. But they didn't start in flowers. It all started in leather. In the 16th century, the town was primarily a tanning town, processing leather from hides, which was an important but pungent business. When Catherine de' Medici, who had brought Italian perfumes to the French court, popularized the fashion for perfumed gloves, the leather workers of the town saw an opportunity. They began growing fragrant flowers to scent their products, developed the expertise to extract those fragrances, and gradually transformed their entire local economy from leather to perfume. By the 17th and 18th centuries, they were supplying the courts of Europe. The dominance of France more broadly meant that French terms became the global language of perfumery. Top notes, heart notes, base notes, eau de parfum, eau de toilette, regardless of where in the world a fragrance was created or worn. But the actual ingredients of perfumery were never European. The raw materials of scent have always come from around the world, and the history of perfumery is in large part a history of global trade, and in its darker chapters of extraction and exploitation. Sandalwood, the warm, creamy base note found in perfumes across every tradition, comes primarily from India, where it has been used in religious and personal fragrance for thousands of years, and from Australia, which now produces significant quantities. It is slow-growing, heavily protected, and was historically subject to severe overharvesting. Patchouli, that distinctive earthy, slightly sweet scent strongly associated with 1960s counterculture in the West, comes from a plant native to Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia and the Philippines, where it had been used in traditional textile making and medicine for centuries before European traders began shipping it. Vetiver, a complex, smoky, grassy root used as a base note in hundreds of perfumes, is harvested from a grass grown primarily in Haiti, India, and Indonesia. Haiti is the world's largest producer, and vetiver farming has been an important part of the island's economy for over a century. The story of perfume is not a French story. France refined the technology and created the commercial language, the ingredients, the raw materials, the foundational knowledge of aromatic plants. That knowledge is global, ancient, and stretches across every continent. And some of the most sophisticated fragrance traditions in the world developed entirely outside of Europe. In Japan, there's a practice called kodo, translated as the way of incense, or sometimes the way of fragrance. It developed in the Heian period, roughly 1,000 years ago, and reached its most refined form among the Japanese aristocracy in the 14th and 15th centuries. Kodo is not about smelling perfume. It's about listening to it. The Japanese verb used for experiencing incense is kiku, to listen, rather than kagu, to smell. The distinction is deliberate and meaningful. To listen to a fragrance implies a different quality of attention, slower, more receptive, less acquisitive. You're not consuming the smell, you're receiving it. A kodo session involves small pieces of fragrant wood being gently heated over charcoal, releasing their scent in thin, cool streams. Participants cup their hands around the censer and breathe in very slowly. There are formal games. In one, participants must identify which of several fragrant woods is which, or recognize a scent associated with passage of classical literature. The world's oldest wood used in kodo, a piece of agar wood called ranjatai, held in the imperial treasury at Nara, has been there since the 8th century. It is considered a national treasure. The central material of kodo is oud, agar wood. And it brings us to one of the most extraordinary facts in the entire episode. Oud does not occur in a healthy tree. The Aquilaria tree, native to the rainforests of Southeast Asia and parts of South Asia, produces no scent at all when it is alive and thriving. But when certain trees become infected by a specific species of mold, something remarkable happens. The tree mounts an immune response, producing a dark, dense, intensely aromatic resin that permeates the hardwood. The infected wood is called agar wood or oud. The uninfected wood, which looks identical from the outside, has no value. In other words, we're wearing the scar tissue of a tree. The smell of oud, that dark, complex, smoky, animalic, almost medicinal quality, is the smell of a living thing fighting back against something that was trying to destroy it. Oud is now one of the most expensive raw materials on earth, sometimes worth more than gold by weight. The wild trees that produce it have been so intensively harvested that most species are now endangered or protected. The perfume industry and the cultures of the Arabian Gulf, South Asia and East Asia, where oud has been beloved for centuries, are now largely supplied by cultivated trees that have been deliberately infected with mold. And then there is a scent from India that I think is the most quietly extraordinary in all of perfumery. It is called miti atta, and it is the smell of rain. More precisely, it is the smell of the first rain falling on dry earth after a long dry season, that particular, ancient, deeply comforting smell that scientists call petrichor. It's produced when rainwater disturbs chemicals in parched soil and releases them into the air. Perfumers in the city of Kanauj in Uttar Pradesh, India, a city that has been a center of fragrance for over 1,000 years, discovered a way to capture it. They take sun-dried clay from the ground and distill its volatile compounds very gently into sandalwood oil. The result smells unmistakably exactly like rain on dust. Let me tell you about indole. Indole is a chemical compound at high concentrations, and I want to be precise here, it smells powerfully of decay, rotting organic matter, things you would cross the street to avoid. In tiny trace concentrations, indole is what gives jasmine and gardenia their intoxicating, almost hypnotic quality. That depth, that suggestion of something slightly warm and animal underneath the floral sweetness, that is indole. And every major jasmine fragrance in the world contains it. Perfumers have long understood what neurochemists are now beginning to explain, that the most compelling smells are never purely pleasant. They contain something complex, something slightly challenging, something the brain has to work with. Perfume is not pretty smell, it is tension, it is the management of contrast. This is why perfume is described in notes, top, heart, and base, which unfold over time. The top notes are what you smell first, the small, light, volatile molecules that evaporate within the first 15 to 30 minutes. Citrus, bergamot, green herbs, ginger, they are bright and immediate and designed to make you want to keep smelling. They are the opening line of the sentence. The heart notes emerge as the top notes fade. Florals, spices, woods at their lighter end, rose, jasmine, cardamom, orris root. These are the personality of the fragrance, the part that lasts 3 or 4 hours and constitutes most of what you experience wearing it through a day. The base notes arrive last and stay longest. The heavy, slow-moving molecules, sandalwood, vetiver, oud, vanilla, ambergris, musks, they can last for hours or even days on fabric. Their chemical function is as fixatives. They slow the evaporation of the lighter notes above them, anchoring the whole structure. A well-constructed perfume is a piece of time-based architecture. It is designed to change, to surprise, to reveal itself gradually. The thing you spray on in the morning is not the same thing you smell on your wrist in the evening. The perfumer is writing a story with a beginning, middle, and end, measured not in pages, but in hours. And here is the thing that makes all of this both wonderful and slightly humbling. We do not all smell the same story. Some people carry genetic variations that make them unable to detect certain musk molecules entirely. They can wear a perfume built around musks and smell almost nothing of what others find overwhelming. Other people have heightened sensitivity to specific compounds. Smell is the most personal of the senses and the most variable. Two people smelling the same bottle can have genuinely different experiences, which means that the perfume you love might not smell to you anything like it smells to the person who made it. The smell you've been wearing for years as your signature is a collaboration between chemistry and biology, between the perfumer's intention and the particular, unrepeatable nature of your own nose. So, the next time you spray on your favorite scent or catch a smell that stops you in your tracks, take a moment with what's actually happening. You might be inhaling a compound that a tree produced to survive a mold infection, or the distilled volatile memory of rain on dry clay from a city in northern India, or a molecule that in another concentration would be entirely different, reminding you that beauty and complexity are not opposites. You're wearing something that connects you without you needing to think about it to the smoke rising in ancient temples, to the apothecaries of the Renaissance, to the agar-wood forests of Borneo, and the clay earth of Kanauj. Perfume is not just a decoration. It is memory stored in molecular form. It is the architecture of a feeling, built in layers, designed to change, meant to be worn by a specific and irreplaceable body. Your body. History isn't only in museums. Sometimes it's invisible, and it travels directly to the part of your brain that knows how to feel. Stay curious. I'm Alexandra, and I'll talk to you next week.